I would like to start with a reading here. I get up in the morning and drink my coffee. The Stygian swill fills my stomach, still churning from last night's whiskey. The last sip is always cool enough to wash down my Lexapro. 20 milligrams is bitter even when you can't taste it. I swallow with apologies to my bipolar disorder. Looks like I'll just feel nothing again, instead of you. I sit down again at the typewriter. The sun is a piss stain in the cobalt sky. 12 more hours of pretending it's not all meaningless. Better to stare at my phone screen than a blank page, or the void. Although after a while, everything stares back. I'd like to take a smoke break from my life. I'd like to take a key bump of moon dust, a line off Bukowski's notebook, a hit of the monoxide out of Sylvia Plath's lungs. It won't be any more pernicious than the sun. It won't be any more deleterious than any kiss I've had before. But at least it might be interesting and something to write about.
Wow. You sound so dark and troubled.
So if that sounded bad to you, we are doing 10 rules for poetry. And that poem there I wrote broke every one of them. And that's why it sucks.
There's some words. What does deleterious mean?
It's like just like bad, like destructive toward you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And pernicious is like the same thing, but in a slow, less obvious way.
I'm familiar with pernicious, but not deleterious.
Yeah, that's, I guess, kind of the idea.
Kind of the point.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll get there.
That's one of the rules that we'll get to.
The thing is, like, I just feel like I've heard this poem.
Yeah,
you know?
A lot of people write poetry like this, and this is maybe more of one style of poetry, and the rules that we'll get to apply to many styles, mm-hmm. but in writing one that had to break all of them, it was easier to write from the perspective of one that I really dislike, which is the Bukowskiist. Yeah. I would say.
Yeah, I've never read Bukowski.
You wouldn't like it. I promise. I don't like it. It does a lot of the things that I have in my do not do's, mm-hmm. Although they're not really targeted at Bukowski reader or anything like that. They're very general. Now, we have, I think, 25 new subscribers since the last episode came out, which is awesome. But for anyone who hasn't been keeping up with the long form content, just so you know, this program is 90% poetry, photography, fiction, and kind of whatever else, mm-hmm. and about 10% war on Warner Brothers. Because of their Looney Tunes
mm-hmm.
erasure.
I've been trying really hard not to read this headline so that I'm fresh.
Yeah, okay,
so what's the latest development?
Warner Bros. To demolish Looney Tunes building after scrubbing classic cartoons.
Okay, wait. What's the Looney Tunes building?
It's where they made all of the Looney Tunes. Oh. It's where they had their animation studio.
Dang.
On Warner Brothers' lot. They're destroying it to make more Max shows, to make room for a studio where they can shoot more HBO shows.
Yeah. Getting these pieces of news like week after week, it really does seem like they're trying to erase Looney Tunes.
It really does. And, I thought, I obviously care about this deeply now because I started thinking about it mm-hmm. on one of our episodes. And now I thought nobody else cares about, like, am I alone? I can't be. I can't be alone. There must be a community of people who care about this way more than me. At least as much as me.
Yeah, because you're a casual observer.
I'm a casual observer. I'm an appreciator of the Looney Tunes. Mm-hmm. But there are some people out there that are really into Looney Tunes. So I went to the Looney Tunes subreddit.
Oh.
And I just want to see what the Looney Tunes community has to say about these, mm-hmm. hits on Looney Tunes. This week after week dismantling of Looney Tunes. So we'll start here. Adventurous Rub 2285 says, "This is probably the most disgusting, despicable, depressing, and the most disrespectful Warner Brothers has ever been with Looney Tunes." And somebody comments an angry picture of Sylvester on there. And then the original poster says, like, "That's me over there. I feel the pain Sylvester is going through." Which, same. I mean, that's me mm-hmm. every day with these headlines coming in.
It's crazy because it's like, if we weren't paying attention, this would just be happening
They're trying to keep it quiet, and we're glad that, I think that was like the Independent UK headline that I pulled. So they're not, I don't even know if the American press is covering this.
It's
You have to go overseas to
keeping
find
it
out what's
under
happening
wraps.
on our soil. And then Weird Donut says absolutely evil.
Is this
Yeah.
about the building?
Yes, this is
Okay.
all about the building. This is in response to this news report.
Okay.
Too short for a high horse says, "This is awful. Looney Tunes is a pillar of animation greatness and was instrumental in pulling the U.S. out of dark times. My grandmother loved the 90s cartoons I showed her, and she, in turn, showed me her favorites. Tex Avery, Looney Tunes, the whole shebang. It was on for us on Boomerang and Cartoon Network, assuming you were born in the 90s and in the U.S. Witty, zippy, clever, slapstick, and visual gags that push the envelope and censors and redefined animation as we know it. Hilarious, beloved characters, fantastic music, superb voice acting from a one-man army, and animators who lived and breathed their craft. To see Looney Tunes being treated this way absolutely breaks my heart and soul. I never thought I would see a day where this would happen to them. It is saddening, nauseating, and truly makes me feel sick. Feel like animation can't reach for the sky when the roots are actively being destroyed." To which Turtle Fan 2012 says this.
That's like, is this a symbol of support in their community? Because to me, this is like basically being like womp womp.
No, I think they're all. I think that's at Warner Brothers.
Oh, okay.
They're saying this is not what they're doing is not okay.
It is not okay. I'm so glad someone is standing up to them.
Yeah, and the comments are alive. A lot of people are saying, this means war. Like the Looney Tunes quote.
Wow.
That was in there probably
I
about
didn't-
50 times.
I didn't know that. That was a
Yeah.
quote.
I don't really know
What it's
from. Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. When it said a one-man voice acting army, I didn't know they had voices.
Wow.
I didn't think they talked.
You don't know like him going, the duck season, rabbit season.
Oh, I guess that's
What's
true.
up, dog?
I just kind of thought it was more like Tom and Jerry core, where it was like, okay, are they?
We got some watching to do.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Are Tom and Jerry under the Looney Tunes umbrella?
Absolutely not.
Are they a different
No.
animation studio?
They are a different animation studio.
Okay.
Yeah, the Looney Tunes are their own. Basically, if they were in Space Jam, they're Looney Tunes.
Okay.
So Tom and Jerry,
They were
separate.
not. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like how like the Muppets are not Sesame Street, but everybody thinks like Kermit with no Big
Right.
Bird,
Right.
But it's just not true.
That's so true.
Yeah, they're separate.
This is really showing how big of a blind spot Looney Tunes is for me.
I don't know if Warner Brothers ever had the rights to Tom and Jerry, but I feel like that was maybe MGM because I don't really remember.
Yeah. People
Yeah.
really care about Looney Tunes.
People really care about Looney Tunes, and they should. It's really important. Yeah.
What are the dark times that they're referencing that the Looney Tunes brought them out of?
The
Like,
90s.
I guess so. Like,
Well,
it seems
I
like they
think-
were speaking culturally, not just like in their
World,
family.
World War II Looney Tunes were big. If you watch early Looney Tunes, there's a lot of depictions of the Nazis and Hitler and
Really?
the Looney Tunes goofing on Nazis. Like,
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like Captain America,
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
Superman and stuff like that. It was like those all kind of came out around the
Mm-hmm.
same time. I'm starting to become one of these people as I read it. I know, like, I would never go on a forum and post it, but it is like, what, you don't have space to build a new building? Like, I think about
Yeah.
how we went to like the Harry Potter studio and they've just turned it into a studio now.
Yeah.
Which they'll probably knock that down too. That's Warner Brothers too.
Mm.
But like, it's like that should just be like a little museum there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, yeah.
The Looney Tunes, it's what's in your heart. It's not
Yeah.
the building that makes it Looney Tunes.
It's also pretty much all on YouTube for free.
Oh.
So you can, I mean, especially all of the older ones,
Mm-hmm.
you can just go and watch like, there's like 5, 6, 7 hour videos of just Looney Tunes shorts.
Wow.
Just, yeah, they're funny. They really are funny, honestly. All right, I want to move on to your headlines here. So
I have a headline. This one's for you.
okay,
10
great.
dark
I love a list.
10 dark academia books so atmospheric you'll smell the old books and ink-stained notes. Let me pull it up. So I have a list of 10 books. I have the titles.
Okay, great.
And so I'm not going to go through like the
No.
summaries of each one, but maybe I can read you the titles and just get like a quick reaction from you.
We have gotten so good at judging a book based off of the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, number 1, Summer Sons, S-O-N-S.
I guessed.
By Lee Mandello.
Okay, Summer Sons. Sounds pretty boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's a Southern Gothic ghost story.
Okay, all right.
But
it's dark academia.
Did you smell the old books when I said it?
Right. I'm sorry. No, it sounds new.
It does sound new.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think that the title is giving dark academia.
I agree with you. It sounds Winter Daughters.
That's more dark academia to me.
Even Winter Sons.
Autumn Sisters.
Is that a book?
No.
Oh, okay. That sounds like a book you might have read, honestly.
It does.
All right, hit me with the next one.
Okay. Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth.
Plain Bad Heroines. Not hitting for me. Not a great title.
Yeah, I agree. All right, ready?
Mm-hmm.
The World Cannot Give by Tara Isabella Burton.
That's a good title.
Yes, I agree. It is a good title.
The World Cannot Give. That's a baller title. Love that.
I feel like it's like the first one that's not like trying to be trendy in some way.
For sure.
So,
yeah.
This one kind of sounds interesting, actually. I was reading the summary a little bit. It's about, well, she goes to what's the word? One of those schools, like a boarding school.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I feel like you have to have a boarding school if it's dark academia.
Oh, absolutely. I would hope so.
What begins as admiration soon descends into a dark tangle of worship, manipulation, and fanaticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like this sounds the most. That's my number one. Not that I'm going to rank all these, but
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next one. A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee.
So this sounds like a movie that I would watch during a day that I don't have a whole lot to do and you are not home.
Right.
And then I would go like, yeah, I watched a movie today. It sucked.
This sounds like it would be a good Chinese neo-noir.
A Lesson in Vengeance? Maybe. Yeah. It would have to be like...
A red lesson in blue vengeance.
Yeah, like...
in the seashell.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lesson in the seashell, and it would be about vengeance.
Right.
Yeah, red lessons in the seashell. Mm-hmm. All the ones called like A Lesson in Vengeance are like... I've learned to parse through those enough that it's like, it's actually not going to be that good, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one... Yes, I would say title alone does meet the criteria of dark academia. A lesson.
That's very true.
In vengeance.
Yeah.
Now, do I think it'd be good? No.
It sounds like a movie that Liam Neeson would be in, like on Redbox or something.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is called The Truants by Kate Weinberg.
Okay, that's I kind of can't really take issue with basically a one-word title.
I have an issue with it.
Okay.
This is supposed to be dark academia. And
they're
not truants.
Is there any darker thing you can do academically than not going to school?
Well,
that's the scariest.
That is so scary.
Thing for any educator.
I think that when you think of dark academia, I usually associate it with a certain style of dress, like a visual aesthetic. Mm-hmm. And it does imply that you spend a lot of time in the library. You have like your cardigans, you've got like your stockings, you've got like dark sweater vests and stuff. Because you're at school. Yeah. These truants are probably wearing jeans.
That's very true. They're probably... Come here. They're probably out of the town. She's being crazy out there. They're rabble-rousing. I don't know why I immediately like think of them as greasers. Because I think if there's like a group of teens skipping school and going around together... That just doesn't really seem like something that happens today.
Yeah.
You know?
It doesn't.
Like, they're going and throwing rocks on the train tracks or at trains or something.
Maybe they are.
Yeah.
You know? Okay. The Lake of Dead Languages by Carol Goodman.
Yeah, that sounds like a dark academia book.
It does. Yeah. I agree. I smell those ink-stained notes when I read that title. Bellwether Revivals by Benjamin Wood.
The Bellwether Revivals. Yeah, I can see it. It sounds boring.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of things I have to learn about.
You have to learn about the bellwether.
And then their revivals.
Right. Like implying that, okay, it went away at some point, probably for a good reason.
Yeah.
To me, and I don't have any reason to think this, I feel like this is about like a glee club.
Yeah, no, I don't really get that.
Like it's
What
like
leads you to that conclusion?
something about it makes me feel like this is about like a society, like a secret society inside of the boarding school in Cambridge or
Okay.
whatever, and it's the singing group. I don't know.
I think that's your what?
Okay, this is about this girl and her brother who is a gifted organist at Cambridge.
Ooh, Cambridge.
Yes. So maybe revivals is like a musical term, and that's why it like pinged that way for me.
Oh, maybe. Is it a musical term?
Who knows? We're not the academic.
I thought that you knew about musicals, though.
I know about musicals, but not necessarily music.
Speaking of musicals, sorry, quick tangent.
Yeah.
We saw Les Mis.
Yeah.
For anyone who is in a city that is coming to you, it rips.
It was amazing.
It's
yeah.
fire. Good musical.
The All-Consuming World by Cassandra Khaw.
That one's all right. I feel like we got a better world title
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
This sounds.
The world cannot give.
Yeah. Yes.
Um.
This is kind of like the same style of
Yeah. Yeah.
title.
Yeah.
I could not say that. This is the same style of title.
Yeah. It is, and I think the other one's a little bit better.
The Atlas Six by Olivier Blake.
Boring.
These Violent Delights by Micah Nemeriver.
Hate that. I don't like that title at all. These Violent Delights. Get out of here.
And this one's in the 1970s, which to me is too late. Unless you're in
Well, this is the most likely
England.
one that you'll smell old books in the ink stained notes off of.
Why?
Because it's the oldest.
1970?
Oh, wait, are all these even older?
Well, the book isn't from the 1970s. It's
Oh, it takes
set
place
in the 70s, which
I
doesn't
see.
give dark academia to me, but I could be wrong.
Trying to be a little bit too, like, how can it be violent and delightful? There must be
Yeah.
something going on here. It's like a little on the nose.
Definitely.
Yeah. Sorry, that author, Michael something, not interested. So, 10 rules for poetry. After the enormous success of our 12 rules for fiction episode, we are following it up with 10 rules for poetry. I would like to preface this by saying these aren't hard rules, you know? Similar to the poetry rules, there's exceptions to every rule. These are really for somebody who is maybe starting out and finding their voice, or they don't have a clear voice or idea of what they want to write about. They're especially young poets, I think. Like, and you're trying to differentiate your writing. You're trying to make something interesting. You love to write, but maybe you sit down and you don't have a lot to write about. Or maybe you think you have a lot to write about and you think that, and I'm not trying to put anybody down here. This was absolutely me at one point too. You think that the things that happened to you or the things that you experience are interesting because you're not old enough yet to know that they kind of happen to everybody. So that's another big one. Or like the deep thoughts that you have are actually a lot more common than you think. You just haven't discussed them or been exposed to them in a larger context yet. And so we'll see several things like that in here. But that's not only young people. There are older people who do these too. So these are mostly things to avoid. I think there's one thing to definitely do in there. And they're kind of ways that you can avoid sounding like everybody else. Avoid these kind of common crutches that poets lean on to make their poetry interesting. And it just doesn't let you stand out or really grow as a poet. It doesn't, these things that I'm going to go through, they kind of call away from you relying on the language, focusing on smaller, more intricate things that happen in life, making meaning out of them. And so with that said, I'll go ahead and get into it. But I did want to give that caveat. You'll probably read stuff on that we'll publish, maybe we already have, maybe in the future, that breaks some of these rules. Like, that's because that person gained all of the skills that whatever they're doing in their poem is not using these things as their main hook to
Yeah.
get you interested in whatever they're doing. It just happens to be in the middle of a great poem.
It's kind of like you have to be able to like execute a form really well in order to safely do it poorly.
Definitely.
Like with physical movement.
Sure.
Or even like I know like with like character actors, like going back to musicals and stuff, like
Yeah.
they do like crazy voices and stuff and they'll maintain it for the whole show, but they have to be talented and trained singers in order to do that safely. So it's almost like if you're going to break the rules, you have to be able to like already know how to do it well and without breaking these rules so that you can break them in a way that doesn't like kneecap your poem.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, it's difficult because it's hard to admit that. I think about myself as a young writer, and the first time that I got, a negative thing back from a professor, I really respected, and I was like, he doesn't understand what I'm doing at all. Like, no, like I'm doing it in a way that is tasteful, that is interesting. Like I'm like advanced. I'm not who you're talking to. I can go ahead and break these rules. Like I
Yeah.
can go ahead and do these things. I can do it artfully. I can kind of skip that step. But he was right and I was wrong. And by kind of following that guidance, now these are my rules. That's a fiction professor I'm talking about. I did really strengthen my writing a ton, and now if I break one of my fiction rules, like I have a cop present in it, it's not that I'm shoehorning a cop into a story to get some excitement around there being crime or because, that's like kind of an obvious thing to put in your story. It's because a police officer shows up because I've created something else interesting that's happening.
Yeah.
And that's just a natural part of the story. So I'll go ahead and get into
Yeah.
it here. Number one, no poetry in your poetry. Now, of course, I don't mean that your poetry has to be a blank page, but a lot of poets like to write about writing poetry.
Oh, yeah.
And poetry is already a pretty insular community, as is literary fiction. And poets really like to romanticize poetry. A lot of people write poetry because it has been romanticized. But keep in mind that poetry is an art form meant to do more than just reflect upon itself. And I think that a lot of poets include writing poetry in their poetry, and then it's poetry for them or for other poets, which is fine. But if you're looking to write an interesting poem, I'm not just saying with broad appeal, but that gets at something artistically interesting or an interesting idea, an interesting situation. Poetry has been written about by poets on end, and there's not a lot of new ground to be broken there or really interesting points to be made there. I think the best poetry about poetry is by well-established poets who then can reflect on what their art has meant to them, and write artfully about it because they've had such a long experience with this art form. Fred Dale, one of my professors, used to say every poet gets one poem about poetry. You get
Okay.
one,
Yeah.
And I think that's great because,
Yeah.
like, if it's a part of your life and that's why you're writing about
Sure.
it, that's one thing. And you're writing about it as a part of your life, but not just as the thing itself.
I like that exception to the rule. It's like you only get one.
Yeah, use it wisely.
Use it wisely
Yeah.
and like think about like, okay, there's a reason that like only get one because it's like it has to be it better be good. It better be like a true like genuine reflection or something
Yeah.
that's so important that you're gonna use your one chance.
Definitely,
to do
yeah.
it.
And it should be personal. I
It's
think that your use of it should be very personal.
I imagine if you do it too often, it becomes kind of self-serving.
I think that it does. And I think a lot of the kind of things that I'll go through here are a little bit like artistically self-serving. And I think that's something also that, everybody has a different opinion on. And I was talking about this. I already expressed this idea to you, but I'll kind of restate it and see if I can do it a little bit more eloquently that kind of our project here, we have a very focused idea of what we value in art, right? And that's not going to be everybody's idea. So I'm not speaking as the word of God here, but I'm speaking as the word of me and what I value and what our publication values. And that's a sort of specific idea of what art is and what art can bring to the table. And one of those values is, getting at connecting with another person and allowing them to empathize with or realize something very complex that you could not just state outright to a person. Art can transmit meaning and feeling in a way that just regular communication can't, and it can bring people to realizations and connections and even maybe differences that that just outright stating something cannot do. And so there are kind of two functions to poetry or almost any art, and I think photography is a great analog for it in this way. One is, I just want to write poetry, so I'm going to write poetry. I don't really care about making it as great art. I write it in a very cathartic way, and that's a very utilitarian use for poetry, and I think that that's great, but that's not what we highlight at Overgrowth, Similar, I use the analogy with you of, you can have a camera and you can take a picture of a moment to remember it, right? That's a very utilitarian use for photography. You That's a tool to serve a purpose, and I think poetry can be that too for a lot of people. But that picture of just your family sitting around a table like all smiling at the camera, that's not a great photograph artistically, probably, right? There's an art to photography too, and so if you're writing that kind of more cathartic poetry that's meant to serve the self, and there's nothing wrong with that, you're not hurting anybody by doing that, but it's less likely to be great art in the same way that snapping that picture for that utility is not as likely to be a artfully composed picture. So just something to consider, and it does take a certain level of intent with what, like, you agreeing with what I'm saying, art should be, to accept these rules. And if you do agree, then these are good rules to follow. And if you disagree, then you'll probably find issue with a lot more of these rules going forward.
Yeah.
And so, two, this rolls off of the other one, no allusions to iconic poets. That kind of goes hand in hand with that self-referentiality. And it also runs the risk of comparing yourself to one of the greats.
Right. Like, don't mention a better movie in your movie.
Exactly. And because then it's like, oh, that's right, this isn't as good as a classic. And so that's one risk you run there. The other one is, because it is also insular and sometimes can feel just like such a closed community, it makes poetry seem like it's a thing of the past. And that I've talked about this a lot, but that these art forms, that any time that they exist, it's like a last bastion of them. And I kind of hate that idea, in a way, like they can just exist forever and be small, and the idea to like reference back when poets were known and iconic and groundbreaking and people knew the names of them. And that's why we all know the names of, Sylvia Plath and Walt Whitman and Edgar Allan Poe. And, but it really calls attention to that fact. There aren't a lot of modern poets that the average American knows.
That's true.
And so let it drive, forward. Let it feel current. Let it feel modern. And I feel like that constant hearkening to the past, just kind of deflates what you're doing in your own poem.
I will say too, like, and I think this is like a reflection from someone who's not like, I'm not a poet. I have very limited knowledge of poetry. It can be isolating.
Definitely.
To hear that, because it's like, I've read The Bell Jar, but I haven't read like a lot of Sylvia Plath. I haven't read any Bukowski, right? Like, I know like Leaves of Grass, right?
Yeah, and I think that, that goes back to that insular thing. Like, not that, I don't believe in the idea of art being needing to be super broad or reach a broad audience. But I also do think that there should be there's a healthy balance there between making art that's like, I don't know a lot about visual art, but when we went to the Van Gogh exhibit, I was moved. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about painting. I don't know anything about his techniques, but there's an obvious mastery there that I think is in any art. I was thinking the same thing, I was just talking about how I was listening to some classical music recently.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about classical music,
Yeah.
but I was like, whoa, like I'm feeling it,
Yeah.
and it's just great. And so I think really great art, and this is something I've maintained for a long time, appeals on a basic level to kind of a general person that's interested, can consume it and appreciate it. And then if you're also into it, it's got even more stuff for you.
Totally.
It's multi-layered in that way and can be enjoyed on multiple levels.
Yeah. But I don't want to feel like I'm not going to get it because you've referenced these other people, and it almost feels like that's like a precursor.
Sure. Yeah,
Like
definitely.
you know how sometimes people, when they're describing music, they'll be like, it's like if so and like so and so were in a band with like a little bit of this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like people you've never ever heard of.
Definitely.
It's
Yeah.
like that's what
I'm really bad about that with music. Yeah.
maybe. And I think with movies sometimes, because you watch so many movies.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
get into niches. And I think it's also, you just know a lot and I know so little that sometimes I'm like, who would ever know?
Yeah.
Like, who knows who Martin Scorsese is?
Well, I think that's a
I
more
know.
common one.
I'm making a point. Like to me, if it's like, if I know nothing, that seems like a
Sure,
lot. But
sure.
anyway, so like that's just from an outsider's perspective. It's like the illusions sometimes make you feel isolated as a reader, because it's like,
Definitely.
well, I don't know who that is. I guess I don't get this poem.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's more that will speak to that as we go forward too. No alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs in your poem. I think a lot of people think that they're being edgy or interesting when they include these things. They're cliches. Um, they're associated with the poet, the dark writer, the troubled artist, right? And people think that it makes them interesting to, be drinking or to be smoking. Or I think cigarettes especially are like really a kind of like cheap analog for like a slow suicide. Like, I don't care about anything, man, and like life is tough and I'm just gonna like live the way I live. And it's like almost like a limp punk symbol
Yeah.
to include smoking. But all of these things kind of tell the reader, like, I'm troubled in a way that I engage in these unhealthy things. And it's just not that interesting. These are all alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs are so unbelievably common that you're not interesting for doing them.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something people just need to know. Like, it's not, yeah.
This reminds me of, I read Tender is the Flesh, and like in like the first like 3 pages, he had lit like 4 cigarettes, and I was like,
That's
okay.
I do sometimes like in like the old Dashiell Hammett books, those like the Thin Man. In the Thin Man, and they're not trying to they're doing it for aesthetic, like they're cool. They're not trying to seem edgy or whatever. They are drinking constantly. That book's only like 130 pages. It's short, but their glasses are never empty. And I read the book and I was like, I'm feeling like ugh right now. Like, they are drinking throughout the entire book, and it's just like him and his wife in a house solving a murder from inside their own house, being kind of weird and catty with each other, and just drinking alcohol constantly.
Oh, sounds awful.
It's kind of funny. It is funny though, like
Yeah.
those swanky old like
Yeah,
pulp
yeah.
writers, and they're not trying to like paint them in any certain, maybe they're trying to make them seem cool, like, I
Probably.
don't really care.
They've got
like,
tumblers. They've
yeah,
got,
exactly. Yeah, so that's for aesthetic, but that's very different, I feel like, from the aesthetic that people try and paint with these things
Totally, which
in
is
poetry.
of being troubled.
Yes, of being troubled.
Dark, mysterious, self-destructive.
Yeah, or even people talking about like how their parents drank or something like that. Like, yeah, that sucks and that's sad, but like, there's probably a time that your parent did a very specific thing. Like, I have the idea of the drunken mother, the drunken father who was didn't care about you, or was either abusive or inconsiderate in some way that deeply affected you. But that's just an idea I have of a type of person. If you give me an example of a specific thing that they did that's not one other cliche, like not showing up to your piano recital, you know, like a classic thing, like something that I wouldn't think about because I didn't have that experience that you had, then that opens my heart to your situation and to your
Yeah.
poem, and it makes your poem pop and interesting and memorable. Where these things that they're in a lot. So yeah.
I have a breaking of this rule
Okay.
that
Yeah.
in the like the Blue Diamond Match poem from Patterson.
Oh yeah.
That's like an example that I feel like breaks this rule because it's something specific. Like he's not just like like the line is like lighting the cigarette of the woman you love.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a cigarette in that poem, but it like serves a very different purpose.
Definitely. And his poetry does not have that tone to it at
Yeah.
all. And the nice thing about that is you're exposed to so many other poems in that movie that you kind of, he's already established himself enough.
Yeah.
Right? That you understand this person.
It feels French, not troubled.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
It's a thin line to toe.
It's a really thin line, and I don't think you should actually take that as, no, it's French. Like, no, it's still the same.
No, it's still the same.
This is off of that one. No psych meds or specific mental illnesses. Now, I will say the poet that I read up front, I used my own stuff in it, right? Like, I wasn't just...
like the poem that you read at the
that
beginning.
I read at the beginning.
Okay.
Like, that's my psych meds, and that's my illness. But at the same time, like, it's very personal, but there are a lot also, and this is hard, and I would not say this if I wasn't one of them. Right? But like, mental illness is extremely prevalent in like artistic communities. People who would write poetry probably are maybe do it as an outlet, or they're struggling with something, or they're, like we were reading in the list, like a particularly introspective or artistic person. Like, those things are often aligned with people who struggle with depression and anxiety and that sort of stuff. You'll meet a lot of those. The tortured artist is a person, right? But when you start getting very self-specific in that way, it kind of starts to feel like that self-serving, like I'm deep for being a tortured feeling, which is just a little bit off-putting, and it's not very interesting, and it's kind of harsh to say to somebody like, hey, you just having this thing, you taking this pill is not interesting, you having this diagnosis is not interesting. The way that affects you on a specific day, if you are able to articulate that to me in a way that is inventive and really elicits empathy from me, because it opens my eyes to your situation in a way they were previously closed, that is interesting. If you present me with a new observation, a new idea, but the fact itself isn't interesting. You know, I would never like advertise my own diagnoses in the pills that I take as a way to garner sympathy and expect people to think that I'm interesting. I don't think that's necessarily what people are really doing cognitively. And I'm saying this because I do receive a lot of submissions with this, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that like this is a struggle. I'm sure it's hard. It's not that I don't care, but it's like, it also doesn't make your poem a good poem, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's like a harsh reality for some poets, I think, is like, and songwriters will do this too. It's like, just having this thing and saying that you have it, don't expect the reader to then be like, oh, and tell me more about that, you know?
Yeah, because it really is like, I'm like, I would love to hear more about it, the therapist to me. But also it's like, I want to hear about it and how it impacts you.
Not that
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Because that's just not, that doesn't tell me anything interesting.
Right.
Because it's like anxiety, depression. First of all, lots of people experience those on different levels, but also it looks so different for so many people that it's like, what does that mean for your life?
Definitely. And when you describe it, if that's your idea, is you want to kind of paint something, have something to say about it. Don't just have, I experienced this and I want to tell you about it. It's just have, and this is for any poem, have another layer. Just like if you have a layer get one more in
Right.
there, because analyze it in some way and present us
Mm-hmm.
with something through your poem that you're trying to communicate about this thing, not just that it's bad. Like, I know it's bad,
Yeah.
and if you're trying to give examples of how it affects you and elicit sympathy in that way, that's not a bad thing to do, to elicit sympathy from a reader. That's in a lot of ways what you want to do with a lot of writing.
Mm-hmm.
But it also needs to be different than I'm depressed, so I lay in bed all day. I'm depressed, so I don't eat. I'm depressed.
Yeah.
Like, those are the things that we know about depression.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what is depression for? Uh, Jane McAllister. I'm just making up a name there.
Yeah.
Like, what is that for you? Like, what is the color of the curtains in your room? What is
Mm-hmm.
like the food that you ate for breakfast? Like, what is your life? What is your dynamic? Like make me know something about you as a person, and what makes why is this interesting coming from you, and what do you have to say
Mm-hmm.
about it that's different from the person next door who's going through the same thing?
You know what lyrics come to mind for this is actually in Laura Laurent,
Yeah, yeah.
when he's like, "You should never be embarrassed by your trouble with living. It's the ones with the sorest throats that have done the most singing."
Definitely. I think Conor Oberst is a great
Mm-hmm.
example of this, because talk about his he'll sing about his, struggles with mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
but he always has an interesting angle on them,
Yeah.
and he has like a lot of like positivity, and his whole thing is a bigger project, so it can kind of he doesn't have to make all his points in one song,
Yeah.
right? Like, he can make multiple points on an album. Putting
Mm-hmm.
Lover I Don't Have to Love back to back with Bowl of Oranges
Mm-hmm.
is like a contrast there. But you can do that within a single poem too,
Yeah.
and then it becomes profound once you add another layer to it. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
number 5, the moon is tired of being written about. Um, a lot. This is a really general cliche, and we're getting away from the maybe some of the deeper ones into more like just rules.
Yeah.
This is just a cliche.
Oh
It's
my
in
goddess.
yeah. Oh my goddess. Katy Perry saw the moon, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's not interesting anymore. It's I don't know. There's not much more
That's
I need to
all you
say
got
about
to say,
that.
I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, the moon's tired of being written
and I'm
about.
tired of reading about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it pops up in something very naturally, then that's one thing. But it's shoehorned into a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very common thing that all of
Yeah.
us see every day, and that people assign a lot of meaning to.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I read a lot of poems about the
Yeah.
moon.
I feel like you have some personal beef with the moon.
It's this basically.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Like, people assign a lot of importance to
I think that's the part
the
you have beef
moon.
with.
Yeah, that is the part I have beef with.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like, as a astrological, like,
Mm-hmm.
astrophysical thing sitting up there reflecting light back on us,
Yeah.
it is amazing, but I don't feel like that's what people really revere it
Yeah.
as, like
Mm-hmm.
a physical kind of gift of an object to the earth. I think that people think like the moon is for me. Like,
Yeah.
and the moon has a personality. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rock,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, and I think it's been assigned almost a common personality by a certain group
I
of.
think that someone's got to write like a kind of a clapback poem to you, and it's going to be called "The Moon Is for Me."
Yeah, okay. I mean, the moon is for everybody. Everything on this earth is for everybody, but it's also like, I think, yeah, the moon is given some undue
Mm-hmm.
meaning that is commonly accepted, and then expresses itself in poetry in the
Yeah.
same way over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over. So yeah, the moon is tired of being written about, and I'm tired of reading about it. Color wheel, colors only. This is, I think, one of the best pieces of advice that I could give. And like I said, like, it can be broken if necessity is there. But use people really try and use very specific descriptions or colors, or be really interesting with their colors. The sky is never blue. It's always cerulean or
Mm-hmm.
azure or cobalt or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, the sun is never yellow. It's always marigold or the sunflower or something. And it creates, for the reader, you have to do a little bit extra work in your brain
Mm-hmm.
because when I say red, the color red pops into your brain.
Right.
When I say crimson, it doesn't take that much longer, but there's a little bit more work. And then when I say like a way less common color than that, then you're
Mm-hmm.
like, you have to do a little bit more work. You have to conjure up this thing. When I say yellow, pops into your brain. When I
Mm-hmm.
say mustard, just a touch more work in your brain,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine if you really need to
Mm-hmm.
paint a specific color. But if you're looking to evoke a pop in the brain of your reader and really paint a picture for them, there is nothing better than red, yellow, purple, black, like these colors that people kind of have a platonic ideal of
Yeah.
in their mind. It makes your poem so much more vibrant and so much easier to
Yeah.
picture.
I'm starting to sense the territory we're getting into, which I think you'll probably have more rules about, which is basically like, don't do style over substance,
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Because
right?
you're the purpose of your poem is to communicate something. That doesn't mean that you have to communicate something like very clearly or like I mean clearly yes, but like very obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But it is to communicate either a feeling
Right.
or a an emotion
Mm-hmm.
or a meaning, a specific meaning. But it is to elicit something in your reader, and that thing should not be confusion.
Right.
I read poems all the time that I don't understand, but I love,
Mm-hmm.
because I get the feeling, and we'll read one of those at the end, um, of them, and I love the layers in them, and I love the language in them, and I love the
Mm-hmm.
images that they bring to my brain, and I love the way that they weave themselves together. And that doesn't mean that I can go and I can say, and this represents that, and this represents
Mm-hmm.
that. They don't have to be incredibly clear, but they have to transmit something to somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you use these other colors, I think people think that they're being extra poetic,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that it's like bland to use a normal color. It's really not. So I have an example of that here, which is this poem Green Beans that we read on one of our other episodes. So this is in the Harvard Review. Mother of God pods, who found you in piles under the yellow cocoons of mulberry tree next to the black kettle leaning on a shed. How malleable your shield, yard-long snake, coiling fibrous, the earth couldn't eat you. Why snap you off the neck? Why not just throw all of you into the pot with some chopped onions and pulverized tomatoes, olive oil, salt, a bit of cinnamon for a long simmer in the cold evening? Now just a finch hovers over the feeder. Oh, sorry. Just now a finch hovers over the feeder, its chartreuse feathers lighting the window. Before the wind blows into the red berries of the bitter sweet where the blackbirds alight. No need for a lid, the pot gurgles, the whole room steams and brims, and purple orchids smear the sill. So this is a poem that uses one non-color wheel color, which is
Right.
chartreuse, which I did get wrong about what that color was when I.
That's like the one. It's like a Mandela effect or something, where it's like people are like,
It
is
is,
it
yeah.
red or is it green?"
But I've circled here or squared here all of the colors that they use, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just yellow, black. Yes, there's chartreuse, and then red, black, purple.
Mm-hmm.
They're nice,
Yeah.
hard colors, and
Yeah.
even the title green beans. Like, and this feels so vibrant and so
Mm-hmm.
concrete of a poem to me. And part of that is the snapping and the
Mm-hmm.
hard physical objects that are in here that are easy to picture. But it's also, it feels incredibly colorful, incredibly full of life, and you're able to picture this very vividly
Mm-hmm.
because it's just these snappy,
Yeah.
easy colors.
I like it.
Yeah. And you're right that does lead me to number 7.
Mm-hmm.
No vocabulary words. Um, Emily, this kind of goes back to that feeling of alienation that
Yeah.
a maybe somebody who's not super into poetry would feel. Have you ever
Mm-hmm.
gotten that
Yeah.
before reading poetry?
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Like, definitely where it's like I just feel like I don't get it, but I'm supposed to.
Right.
And I think I have a pretty big vocabulary because I am a reader. I'm just not like a poetry reader. But even then, it's like if you use too much of it, I feel like, what did you want me to take away from this? You
Definitely.
know?
And I think that's the thing is like when I say that it's not like no vocabulary words that would be vocabulary words for a 6th grader, but
Right.
for me or for you or for
Totally.
a regular person who is an adult in the world
Yeah.
and, like has some education and English is their first language,
Yeah.
like using a word that you know that most of them don't know,
Like deleterious.
like deleterious, is just kind of like there has to be a more fitting word that communicates your point better. Now, if there's really not, that's when you use the word. Like if there's really, or you're really going for a very specific sound, and this is a very
Yeah.
sonically based poet, but like in general, I think this goes back to that idea of like a poet trying to impress their reader. That should never be
Sure.
the purpose of your poetry. It should be to communicate to your reader. Um,
I like that idea because I also think that there's like, oh gosh, wait, I lost it. Hang on. Trying to impress your reader. Oh, like the English language, it's not like German where we have these long words that can communicate like such a specific feeling in
yeah.
like one phrase.
Schadenfreude. Yeah.
Exactly. But isn't it better to just explain directly what you're trying to say than trying to capture it in a word? Like,
I see what you
I
mean.
think it can be more effective that way.
Definitely. And that's certainly true for prose writing, I would
Mm,
say. And in poetry, just remembering like it's so much more abstract and it's so much more less the communication of a specific meaning as it is the feeling. It's a much more impressionistic art. I mean, it's so fluid that a lot of people don't write very
yeah.
impressionistic poetry. But at the same time, if you're looking to leave an impression on somebody and you use a word that is not understood, then that impression is confusion. And I think the worst thing that your poem can really do is leave somebody feeling either like they will forget about that poem and never think about, like it was completely uninterested, or just confused. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what, like, and like I said, like I read poems that I don't understand, but I don't leave them with my main takeaway being that I didn't understand everything in
Yeah.
them. I took away that, wow, I really loved those images. I really loved that that one comparison. I really loved that final line, and I didn't feel like they were trying to impress me.
Yeah.
I felt like they had something they wanted to say, or they had a picture that they wanted to paint, and they painted it,
Yeah.
and I was able to receive it, and view it. So,
Yeah.
all right, number 8. No mentions of the void, oblivion, everythingness, nothingness, etc. Basically, no specific mentions of existentialism in the same way that we're talking about using things as a crutch to give your poem meaning, or make your poem seem interesting. I think a lot of people think, a lot of poets, especially young poets, like kind of discover existentialism. It seems very, very deep. And then you think that your poem is deep because it approaches this subject, which you can definitely have a deep existential poem, but your poem's not deep for being about existentialism, or it doesn't really add an interesting level of depth to your poem to bring up the void. It almost, kind of how we're talking about that feeling of impressing somebody with
Yeah.
your knowledge, or your own depth of person and thought and everything. This is kind of the everyman's deep thoughts.
Yeah. Honestly, like so much of it sounds like the show don't tell idea of like
Sure.
don't tell me it's the void, like
Yeah.
show me how that makes you feel or like don't tell me it's your, like mental illness, like tell like show wait. Wait, hold on a second.
Don't
Show
don't
don't tell.
Yeah.
Right. Don't tell
Just
me.
illustrate for me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Illustrate for me the specifics of this thing that you're referencing, and in that I will come to my own understanding of it. And just going back over and over to that, your thing is not to make yourself seem impressive or interesting as a person. The idea is to make a great piece of art.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that one is what it is. This is my only do on the list, and this is something that is maybe more of a tip than a rule. But I think that when you are cutting all of these things, I'm saying cut, and you're thinking like, where? Okay, well, how do I approach something? What angle can I come at something from. A great thing to do is this, to make an original claim or demand of, it can be kind of directed toward the reader, even if it's not of the reader, but say something like, give me X and Y, like make this a proclamation, or say, X equals Y, I'm trying to think of a good example off of the top of my head. Something like, there is no greater tragedy than, a leaf that has fallen from a tree that still has most of its life to go. There you go.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a claim,
yeah,
right?
you're saying there is no greater tragedy. And I think that also, as authors, just taking that word author, you're trying to be an authority over your words. You are dictating the space, and you want people to feel like you are in control of what you're doing.
Is that like a connection? Like,
Like, think like, God is the author of the universe. Like, they'll say that. It's like, you are the authority. It is a connection.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. Like, you're making it, like, you are creating the rules, you are creating the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So people can sniff out really easily, and that's the difference between professional and amateur writing, or professional and amateur feeling writing, is if it seems like the author is in full control of the page and of their language, and like they have a very clear idea and they're expressing it the way that they want to express it. And it almost has a take it or leave it feel, but it takes a lot to get that take it or leave it feel. And most of that is avoiding doing a lot of these kind of pitfalls here, but a lot of that is just seeming like you are in charge of this page, and you're here to deliver something to your reader.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to do that. It makes your writing feel very strong and sure of itself. This is something we bring up Terrence Hayes a lot, but that he does a lot. He'll make a demand of just say, bring me this, or I want a world with this, or give me this, and it just
tell me this.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's a good do on there.
Yeah, I think that's really good, and I see this a lot in your writing.
I love to do it.
Yeah.
It works really well, and it's like, even in fiction, it creates a really strong narrator or character if they know what they want.
Yes.
Or if they think they know what they want, I should say. Like, I think it's a really interesting character if they think they know what they want and they're completely wrong about it.
Yeah.
Then you start to get a really dynamic character.
Yeah.
But
they have their own rules for things.
Yeah.
And they're demanding or claiming that is the way things should be.
Definitely. Jelly bean. I feel like for the best thing that a fictional character can have is a sound and confident, not even sound, but like, at least to them, reasonable sense of logic.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't make sense to us, that that what they're doing makes sense to them.
Yes. An example of that in a book I read recently was the book Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. And that narrator is not necessarily unreliable. She just has a really like distinct set of like how she thinks the world works.
Okay.
And it like pervades through the whole story. And it's
like,
that's
great.
It's very interesting because it's like, it's pretty wacky. Like, she has a lot of ideas about like horoscopes and stuff. She has a lot of ideas about like animals and like veganism, and like it literally informs her whole worldview in a way that it's like, well, I'm really getting to know this person.
Yeah.
This narrator, even though it's like leading her to do things that seem strange or erratic,
Right, definitely. Because we're all like that. Like, I think viewed from a certain distance.
Sure.
Especially, it's easier to do with some characters like that are real characters, But people are kind of illogical, and you come up with your own conclusions and ways of doing things, and then kind of ride those out through all aspects of your life, I think. And they don't like make sense sometimes paired right up next to each other, but we all feel like we are doing what we think is like kind of the right thing or the best thing to do at any given moment. So giving a reader a window into why your character is doing what they're doing can be really helpful.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Number 10, no bitching. So this is the last rule. And I specified bitching instead of just complaining because there are sometimes that a lamentation can be good. I would say if you're, a young poet, maybe try and stray away from a lamentation in general because it might really come off as bitching. Poetry, by and large, seems to have become at some point the art of complaining. Hi, Jellybean. Welcome to the show.
He's bitching right
He is.
now.
He is. I receive a lot of poems as submissions. We receive a lot of poems. I hear a lot at readings that are just somebody complaining about their life. That doesn't mean that their complaints are invalid, right? And that doesn't mean that uh, it's not helpful for them to write these things out. But in terms of like making a good piece of art, there are a lot of people out there just complaining, and they don't have like a whole lot to say about the circumstances. The essence of their poem is the complaint.
Yeah. And like maybe that's like healing or cathartic, like you said earlier. But as far as like crafting art to share and have appreciated as art and not just like a means of expression.
Yeah.
Which is like, there's, I guess, like kind of that line of like, is the purpose of poetry just to express, or is it to like express to an audience, you know?
Yeah, and that goes back to that utilitarian view
Yeah.
that I went like if the purpose for yourself is just you want to express yourself and that's what you want to do and you just want somebody to hear it, then yeah, that's going to result in one type of poem. If the purpose is to very artfully express yourself and really well communicate something and create a good piece of art in doing so, then that's going to create a very different poem.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, kind of at the top, it kind of depends on what your values are and what you're looking to do by writing a poem.
That's
true.
true.
But if you're writing a poem to get it published in a journal that showcases talent and ability, and we get a lot of poems that are somebody complaining about something. This can be extended a bit too to just the like even like political stuff. I get a lot of stuff that's just somebody, this is a rough political moment right now. People are feeling it. And I get stuff that's just a rant about politics, and I agree with each point along the rant. But that doesn't make it a good poem, That doesn't if it's not telling me anything that I don't already know or haven't already thought about, or it's not articulating it artfully, or in a way that is makes me think about anything any differently, or would make somebody who doesn't agree with them think about it any differently, then it's not artful in my eyes. And you could say, who am I to judge? But I'm the editor of this
That's
journal,
true.
and so then
Yeah.
that's a judgment that I have to make. And I've we talk a lot about just the idea behind the message that you're trying to get across versus the way that you get it across and what's actually effectual too. And one thing that I know that we've talked about endlessly on here is that typically the stuff that is less just front facing in its message is more effectual. Just it happens to be because it touches you in a way different than just being told something. So yeah, that's the 10 rules.
I think
right there.
these are great rules.
Yeah, I would say give it a shot. Try and write a poem according to it. See how it comes out. If it feels interesting, it forces you. It can be uncomfortable because it forces you to avoid a lot of things that you would normally lean on, which I think is the best thing that writing can really do, or that like writing advice can do. It's to say, hey, these crutches, you're relying on them too much. Let's get back into that imagination. Let's get back into that deep thinking.
Yeah.
And let's, really come at something with a new, fresh, interesting angle. And so I think if you kind of follow these, that you'll end up with something like that. I'll insert at the end of this, Daylight issue comes out on Friday. Really excited about that. Getting it all formatted and everything right now. It's coming together really nicely, and I'm really proud of all of the work that's going to be in there, and I'm really happy with a lot of the weekly features too. I mean, all of them. We again had a huge surplus of submissions, which we made our way through quickly again, which was awesome. And I'm really happy with our choices. And last thing I will say is about the Patreon, which I posted this on our Instagram story, but just for anybody who is interested or has already subscribed to the Patreon, if you do it through your iPhone, Apple like upcharges you and then just keeps the upcharge. Like we don't get it. They like charge you like $7.50 for the $5 tier and $14 for the $10 tier.
So I noticed that on my phone when I went to look at it, and the only reason I like knew it was a mistake was because you say in the text like $5 tier, but it says $7.50, and I was like, what?
So it's, if you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. Do it from just your laptop because don't give Apple. That's crazy. I can't believe they're squeezing like
$2.50 like a month for
to Apple for nothing.
Yeah, for a $5 subscription.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's crazy.
It's messed up.
If you'd like to support us there, that's awesome. Just do it from your computer.
Yeah. And we got a $2 tier, a $5 tier, and then a $10 tier if you want your name accredited to you in our print issue at the end of the year as a patron. So.
Well, excellent rules, Maxwell.
Thank you very much. My word is law.
All
and we'll see y'all next Wednesday. Bye.